solo system is this month's Gamecrafter Spotlight Game of the Month, and it boasts that you can play multiplayer game solitaire. Does it work? Let's open it up, talk about it. What does that even mean, Bowers Game Corner? Ahoy there, YouTube! I'm back again today for another game review, and today I'm very excited to be checking out not a game, but a game module, the Solo system. It's available on the Gamecrafter, because I do a Gamecrafter Spotlight every single month, where I do gameplay and a deep unboxing, and then eventually a review of said game, and so this is that review. And by the way, that Gamecrafter link is down below. But in the Solo system, you're going to get this tuck box of cards. And in here, there's going to be 4 different types of cards that you're going to see. Now, the first thing, I'm just going to run you through what a mock turn of you would set it up for, say, 2 players. Flip this card first when it's their turn. Whoop. This is, nope, wrong card. That's probability. First, you click on their personality. You're going to flip over the personality. So there's risk taker, opportunist, defender, builder, aggressive. And on the back of these cards, they got a whole list of different attributes of how this style player is going to play on this specific turn, because they will change from turn to turn to turn, which we'll talk more about in the pros and cons. Also, little side note, there's some extra personality cards in here as well for when you get like super advanced with this, and they just have pictures instead of the bit of description on there. But honestly, I feel like the description is much, much more useful. And in future versions of this game, because I'd love to see a second edition of this game, I think they should get rid of those pictures and put some more useful stuff in there. But, anywho, that's what you flip over. You flip over personality and you figure out what kind of player the player is going to be this time. So, depending on what kind of player they are, you look around the board state and you say, all right, well, what would this kind of player do? And you say, I think they would probably do that. You might say you'll probably do that. You're unsure, or you'll probably not do that. So then you say, I think they would do move X, Y, and Z. And you say, I'm unsure, but yeah, we'll go probably. You flip over one of these probability cards, and it either says yes, or well, it says yes or no, if you're probably sure, unsure, or probably not sure. Now, this system is a bit wonky and can be a bit annoying, especially because some of the probablys have no's on them, and so you might spend like a minute or two being like, really, what kind of move would they make? Be like, oh, this is exactly the move that they would make, and the probability card would say, no, that's not what they do, and you'd be like, oh, crap, what am I going to do? I guess they're going to do a different move. And then you really have to think about it. They actually mention this in the rules. They go a bit meta to say there's a couple different ways to play this. One, you can kind of think about it less, but you're going to get not as good of an experience potentially. Or you can think about it more, but that is going to stretch out the game, and that is 100% the case. But we'll talk about that in the pros and the cons. Bad boy, focus more on the gameplay right now. So, once you have that probability done, they do the move, and then you take your turn, and then it gets back to them, and you flip a new personality card, and you figure out what they're going to do, and that's it. Now, there's also these 2 cards right here. They're called Strategy and Tactics. Now, if you're playing a more advanced game, or in particular like a person on a map game, like, say, Risk, or, just Blood Rage, I mean, tons of other games. Pretty much any game where you're going to put something onto a map and be moving around, then you might need to use this, because this is going to also guide you a little bit towards how that person is going to play, because, yes, they might be an aggressive player, but now they're going to be moving forward, and they're going to be targeting the second strongest unit, and their objective is move towards your biggest group, and they even have a little quadrant on the map where something is going to take place. There's a lot of thought put into this. In fact, there's so much thought put into this, and it didn't all fit in the teeny tiny little rule booklet, which, once again, one of the things I'd love to see in the second edition, there's more advanced rules online, which is kind of cool. Then last but not least, you have these strategy cards here, which, once again, if you're not quite sure what they do, you might look at one of these and say, opponents will try to collect, stockpile one type of rare / hard to get resource strings. And it's all helpful there. They tried to put as much into this tiny little tuck box so that you would be able to play just about any solo, or just about any game solo, which I feel like is very admirable. That's the description. So now we get to the review part of it. What are the pros? What are the cons? First, on the con side, the game's not going to be for everybody for a variety of different reasons. It's not perfect, and I know that's shocking, but it is apparently kind of difficult to try and design a solo module for every single game everywhere. Like, that's because that's kind of what this is doing. Now, obviously, there's some that it just wouldn't work, like social deduction games or various different things like that. But for a huge chunk of games, I feel like they did a good job. But yeah, it's not going to be for everybody. And it's not going to... I'm really trying to put cons on this, and it's such an insanely ambitious idea that I feel like that overshadows every other nitpick that I have about this, where it's like, oh yeah, some games you're going to have are going to be super unbalanced, because one of the ways they try to balance the game is by having what's called the star system. So on some of these personality cards right there, you will see stars, and there's a whole bunch of icons around the side because they put all these icons in, and some of them are applicable for some games. Like on the personality, there's like some numbers up here. You're like, oh, what are these? Well, if you read the rules, you say, oh, that's for if you're playing an auction game. We have something like that, and that's fantastic. But when you first start a game, you essentially have to house rule what that star is going to mean, and if you do it too little, you might potentially crush your opponent, and if you do it too much, your opponent might absolutely destroy you. And I saw that, and I tried this out 5 separate times, 5 different games throughout the month, because I'll be honest with you, it's really cool when we go back in the pros. And both of those scenarios happened once. The other 3 times, I kind of got a little bit more flexible, and I'd be like, you know what, I am going to tweak what the stars do, because it definitely feels like they're kicking my butt, or I'm kicking their butt. And that's a little bit of a con, but once again, it goes back to what I originally said. They're trying to design a solo variant for every single game out there. And I can look over that. I wish they would have used their cards a little bit better. I wish the rulebook was honestly a little bit bigger, or they found some ways to include those extra rules as opposed to like the pictures and the personality cards. That just seemed like a little bit of a wasted space on the cards there. I definitely feel like there could have been something else there that would have been better. Even if it was just something to help me take notes, because that's one thing. I think you're definitely going to want to take notes when you play this. Like if you're like, oh, I love Roll Through the Ages and I want to play it. I actually think that one's solo, but you get what I'm saying. You would want to write down some special notes for how you use the solo system solo. I don't really have many cons on this, honestly. It's weird, it's wild, it's ambitious, and it works pretty well. We're going to the pros. So we're going to the pros. I think this is great. I'm not going to slap a Bauer's Best seal on it, but I think if it ever came out with a second edition, little improved, I could see that, because at the end of the day, and I think they're actually underselling themselves here. So I want to start off with the biggest pro I have, which one you might be thinking about. But this is not only great for adding a solo player, but it's also great just for adding an additional player to a game. I did this 3 times with my son, where we played a 2-player game, and then we're like, all right, we're just going to try and roll a solo system as a 3rd player. And that made things way more interesting. Like, I could see myself using this with my son on 3-player games in the future, and that is really, like, that's really something. So if you're like specifically a solo gamer and there's like some 2-player games, I think this is the way to go. And what I also really love about the solo system is it makes you feel like you're a better player of the game, partially because one of the cons that I mentioned a little bit earlier, which is because I think like there's like 3 cards in the deck where it says, even if you say probably on the probability, they say, no, you need to think of a plan B. And if you get 2 of those in a row, let me tell you, that is really annoying when you're like, this is exactly what they do, and the game's like, no, second plan. And you're like, well, fine, I guess this is what they would do. And they're like, no, third plan. You're like, what? What did the third plan sucks? But it's so interesting because then you get to explore the game and you get to see the ramifications of making these stupid mistakes. And sometimes they work out. And maybe that's because I was giving them too much power on the special ability stuff. At the end of the day, I felt like the games that I played with the solo system, I was a better player of the game. Because it's not just you making the decisions for the other person. It's the game saying, this is the type of decision you're going to make this turn. Go at it. How would you play from this different perspective? And by doing that, I feel like you get better at the game. Because you might play Dominion the money strategy. You might just be like, I always go money. Or I always go curses, or whatever it is. And this is going to force you to try and do it differently from turn to turn to turn. Yeah. I don't know. I don't really have anything else to say. I think it's a really cool idea. I enjoyed playing with it. I'm going to keep it in my collection. It was easy to learn for the most part, because at the core, a lot of the games you're just going to use the 2 different style cards, and if you need more help, you go to the other cards. At the end of the day, solo system. If you're in the market to try and make games solo or add a 3rd player, like if you routinely only play 2-player games, this is something to try out because it is fun. It's fun to try and make the decisions. You get to see more of the games. I think that's a good thing too, because you're playing for that 3rd player. it's something I really enjoy, and I think that I would put this very good to great. I don't think it's fantastic. I think it's a little rough around the edges. Could use a little polish here and there, but I think it's a very good to great concept. It works fine. It's enjoyable. I do think it stretches out the games longer. You have to know that. But if you're a solo gamer, do you really care? Because that's one of the things I love about solo gaming. I just leave it on the table, come back to it. I don't care. So yeah, really enjoyed this one. Be sure to check out that Gamecrafter link down below. It looks like it might be Covetous. Be sure to tell them Bowers Game Quarter sent you. Also, if you are ever thinking about making a prototype for your game or making a game, go check out the Gamecrafter. I did that like 11 years ago. Kickstarted it. Now it's a thing. It's out in the world. It's really cool. You can do the same. And hey, maybe your game will end up in my basement. You never know. But yeah, you should check them out. They do fantastic prototypes. They do a whole bunch of stuff. And if you enjoyed the content, please be sure to click on the subscribe button down below as I'm trying to reach 17,000 subscribers in 2023 to make it my biggest year ever. Bye-bye.